भगवान का जन्म निकाल दीजिए। हाँ? मैंने तब बोला 49 chapter.
Chapter 49, Akrura's mission in Hastinapur. This chapter describes how Akrura went to Hastinapur, saw Dhritarashtra's unfair behavior towards his nephews, the Pandavas, and then returned to Mathura. On the order of Lord Krishna, Akrura went to Hastinapur, where he met the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and then set about to find out how Dhritarashtra was treating the latter. This task would keep Akrura in Hastinapur for several months. Vidura and Kunti Devi described to Akrura in detail how Dhritarashtra's sons, envious of the exalted qualities of the Pandavas, had tried to destroy them by various evil means.
हाँ
Had tried to destroy them by various evil means and were contemplating further atrocities. With tearful eyes, Kunti Devi asked Akrura, quote, "Do my parents and other relatives ever think of me and my sons? And will Krishna ever come to console us in our distress?" Then Kunti Devi began to chant Lord Krishna's names for her protection, and she also chanted mantras expressing surrender to him. Akrura assured Kunti Devi. Akrura said, "Since your sons were born from demigods like Dharma and Vayu, there is no reason to expect that any misfortune will befall them. Rather, you should be confident that very soon they will receive the greatest possible good fortune." Akrura then delivered to Dhritarashtra the message from Krishna and Balram. Akrura told the king, he said, "You have assumed the royal throne after the death of Pandu, seeing all equally, which is the religious duty of kings. You have assumed the royal throne after the death of Pandu, seeing all equally, which is the religious duty of kings. You should protect all your subjects and personal relations. By such fair behavior, you will gain all fame and good fortune. But if you act otherwise, you will attain only infamy in this life and condemnation to a hellish existence in the next. A living being takes his birth all alone, and alone he gives up his life. Alone he enjoys the fruit of his piety and sin. If one fails to understand the true identity of the self and instead maintains his progeny by indulging in evil deeds, then surely he will go to hell. One should therefore learn to understand the unsteadiness of material existence, which is like a sleeper's dream, a magician's illusion, or a fight of fancy, and should thus control his mind in order to remain peaceful and equipoised. To this, Dhritarashtra replied, I cannot hear enough of your beneficial words, O Akrura, which are like the sweet nectar of immortality. But because the tight knot of affection for my sons has made me biased towards them, your statements cannot become fixed within my mind. No one can transgress the arrangement of the Supreme Lord. His purpose for descending into the Yadu dynasty will inevitably be fulfilled. Knowing now the mentality of Dhritarashtra, Akrura took permission from his dear relatives and friends and returned to Mathura, where he related everything to Lord Krishna and Balram. Text 1-2. Translation. Shukdev Goswami said, Akrura went to Hastinapur, the city distinguished by the glory of the Pururava rulers. There he saw Dhritarashtra, Bhishma, Vidura and Kunti, along with Bahlika and his son Somdatta. He also saw Dronacharya, Kripacharya, Karna, Duryodhana, Ashwathama, the Pandavas and other close friends. Text 3. After Akrura, the son of Gandhini, had appropriately greeted all his relatives and friends, they asked him for news of their family members, and he in turn asked about their welfare. Text 4. He remained in Hastinapur for several months to scrutinize the conduct of the weak-willed king, who had bad sons and who was inclined to give in to the whims of mischievous advisors. Text 5-6. Translation. Kunti and Vidura described to Akrura in detail the evil intentions of the Dhritarashtra's sons, who could not tolerate the great qualities of Kunti's sons, such as their powerful influence, military skill, physical strength, bravery, and humility, or the intense affection the citizens had for them. Kunti and Vidura also told Akrura about how the sons of the Dhritarashtra had tried to poison the Pandavas and carry out other such plots. Text 7. Kunti Devi, taking advantage of her brother Akrura's visit, approached him confidentially. While remembering her birthplace, she spoke with tears in her eyes. Text 8. Queen Kunti said, O gentle one, do my parents, brothers, sisters, nephews, family women, and girlhood friends still remember us? Text 9. Does my nephew Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the compassionate shelter of his devotees, still remember his aunt's sons? And does the lotus-eyed Ram remember them also? Text 10. Now that I am suffering in the midst of my enemies like a doe in the midst of wolves, will Krishna come to console me and my fatherless sons with his words? Krishna, Krishna, O great yogi, O super soul, supreme soul, and protector of the universe, O Govinda, please protect me, who have surrendered to you. I and my sons are being overwhelmed by trouble. Purport. Since Lord Krishna maintains the entire universe, though Kunti Devi, surely he can protect our family. Thought Kunti Devi, surely he can protect our family. The word Avasidatim indicates that Kunti Devi was overwhelmed by troubles. Thus exhausted, she was helplessly taking shelter of Sri Krishna. In her prayers in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Kunti admits that all these troubles were actually a blessing, for they force her to always be intensely Krishna conscious. Text 12. For persons fearful of death and rebirth, I see no shelter other than your liberating lotus feet, for you are the Supreme Lord. Text 13. I offer my obeisances unto you, Krishna, the Supreme Pure, the Absolute Truth and the Super Soul, the Lord of pure devotional service and the source of all knowledge. I have come to you for shelter. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami has translated the word Yogaya as unto Krishna, the source of knowledge. The word yoga indicates connection and also the means to achieve something. As conscious souls, we have a connection with the Supreme Soul through bhakti or devotion. Through that relationship, we experience perfect knowledge of the Supreme Soul. Since the Supreme Soul is the Absolute Truth, perfect knowledge of Him means perfect knowledge of everything. As stated in Mukunda Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad 1.3, Kasmin bhagavo vigyate sarvam idam vigyatam bhavati. When the Absolute is understood, everything is understood. Thus Lord Krishna Himself, by His spiritual potency, establishes our connection with Him. And that connection is the source of all spiritual knowledge. Thus Acharya Sridhar, by his thoughtful translation, stimulates us to deeper understanding of Krishna conscious philosophy. Text 14. Shukdev Goswami said, thus meditating on her family members and also on Krishna, the Lord of the universe, your great grandmother Kunti Devi began to cry out in grief, O king. Text 15. Both Akrura, who shared Queen Kunti's distress and happiness, and the illustrious Vidura, consoled the queen by reminding her of the extraordinary way her sons had taken birth. Purport. Akrura and Vidur reminded Queen Kunti that her sons were born of heavenly gods and thus could not be vanquished like ordinary mortals. In fact, an extraordinary victory awaited this most pious family. Text 16. The ardent affection King Dhritarashtra felt for his sons had made him act unjustly towards the Pandavas. Just before leaving, Akrura approached the king, who was seated amongst his friends and supporters, and related to him the message that his relative, Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, had sent out of friendship. Text 17. Akrura said, O my dear son of Vichitravirya, O enhancer of the Kuru's glory, your brother Pandu having passed away, you have now assumed the royal throne. Purport. Akrura was speaking ironically, since the young sons of Pandu should actually have been occupying the throne. Upon the death of Pandu, they were too young to immediately govern and so were put in Dhritarashtra's care. But now sufficient time has passed and their legitimate rights should have been recognized. Text 18. By religiously protecting the earth, delighting your subjects with your noble character, and treating all your relatives equally, you will surely achieve success and glory. Purport. Akrura told Dhritarashtra that even though he had usurped the throne, if he now ruled according to the principles of dharma and behaved properly, he could be successful. Text 19. If you act otherwise, however, people will condemn you in this world, and in the next life you will enter the darkness of hell. Remain equally disposed, therefore, towards Pandu's sons and your own. Purport. Dhritarashtra's whole program was his excessive attachment to his nasty sons.
Chandan.
That was the fatal flaw that caused his downfall. There was no lack of good advice from all sides, and Dhritarashtra even admitted that the advice was sound, but he could not follow it. One can have clear, practical intelligence when the mind and heart are pure. Text 20. In this world, no one has any permanent relationship with anyone else. O king, we cannot stay forever even with our own body, what to speak of our wife, children and the rest. Text 21. Every creature is born alone and dies alone, and alone one experiences the just reward of his good and evil deeds. Purport. The term Anubhunkte is significant here. Bhunkte means the living being experiences, and Anu means following or in sequence. In other words, we experience happiness and distress according to the moral and spiritual quality of our activities. We are responsible for what we do. Dhritarashtra was falsely and obsessively attached to his evil-minded sons, forgetting that he alone would have to suffer for his imprudent behavior. Text 22. In the guise of dear dependence, strangers steal the sinful acquired wealth of a foolish man, just as the offspring of a fish drink of the water that sustains the fish. Purport. Ordinary people feel that they cannot live without their wealth, although their possession of it is circumstantial and temporary. Just as wealth gives life to an ordinary man, water gives life to a fish. One's dear dependents, however, steal one's wealth, just as a fish's offspring drink up the water sustaining the fish. In the words of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this world is a weird abode. Text 23. A fool indulges in sin to maintain his life, wealth and children and other relatives, for he thinks these things are mine. In the end, however, these very things all abandon him, leaving him frustrated. Purport. In these verses, Akrura is giving rather frank advice to Dhritarashtra. Those who know the story of the Mahabharata will realize how relevant and prophetic these instructions are, and how much Dhritarashtra suffered for not accepting them. Although one tenaciously clings to his property, in the end all is lost, and the blundering soul is swept away by the wheel of birth and death. Text 24. Abandoned by his so-called dependents, ignorant of the actual goal of life, indifferent to his real duty, and having failed to fulfill his purposes, the foolish soul enters the blinderness of hell, taking his sinful reactions with him. Purport. It is said, ironic, that materialistic persons who labor so assiduously to accumulate insurance, security, property and family enter the darkness of hell equipped with nothing but the painful reactions of their sins. On the other hand, those who cultivate Krishna consciousness, spiritual life, while apparently neglecting to accumulate property, a large family and so on, enter the next life enriched with many spiritual assets and thus enjoy the deep pleasures of the soul. Text 25. Therefore, O king, looking upon this world as a dream, a magician's illusion or a fight of fancy, please control your mind with intelligence and become equipoised and peaceful, my lord. Text 26. Dhritarashtra said, O master of charity, I can never be satiated while hearing your auspicious words. Indeed, I am like a mortal who has obtained the nectar of the gods. Purport. In the opinion of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, Dhritarashtra was in fact proud, and he felt he already knew everything Akrura was speaking, but to maintain diplomatic gravity, he spoke as a saintly gentleman. Text 27. Even so, gentle Akrura, because my unsteady heart is prejudiced by affection for my sons, these pleasing words of yours cannot remain fixed there, just as lightning cannot remain fixed in a cloud. 28. Though, who can defy the injunctions of the Supreme Lord, who has now descended in the Yadu dynasty to diminish the earth's burden? Purport. Naturally, we would like to ask Dhritarashtra, if you know all this, why don't you behave properly? Of course, this is exactly Dhritarashtra's point. He feels that since events have already been set in motion, he is helpless to change them. In fact, events have been set in motion by his attachment and sinful propensities. And therefore, he should have taken responsibility of his own acts. Lord Krishna clearly states in Bhagavad Gita 5.15, Nadate kasyatit papam. The Supreme Lord does not accept responsibility for anyone's sinful activities. It is a dangerous policy to claim that we are acting improperly because of destiny or fate. We should take up Krishna consciousness seriously and create an auspicious future for ourselves and our associates. Finally, one may argue that, after all, Dhritarashtra is involved in the Lord's pastimes and is actually his eternal associate. In answer to this, we may say that the Lord's pastimes are not only entertaining but also didactic. And the lesson here is that Dhritarashtra should have acted properly. That is what the Lord wanted to teach. Dhritarashtra claims that Krishna came to relieve the burden of the earth, but the earth's burden is precisely the improper behavior of its inhabitants. So let us take the lesson the Lord wants to teach here and be instructed for our benefit. Text 29. I offer my obeisances to Him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who creates this universe by the inconceivable activity of His material energy and then distributes the various modes of nature by entering within the creation. From Him, the meaning of whose pastime is unfathomable, come both the entangling cycle of birth and death and the process of deliverance from it. Purport. When all is said and done, Dhritarashtra was not an ordinary person, but an associate of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. Certainly, an ordinary person could not offer such a learned hymn to the Lord. Text 30. Shukadeva Goswami said, having thus appraised himself of the king's attitude, Akrura, the descendant of the Yadu, took permission from his well-wishing relatives and friends and returned to the capital of the Yadavas. Text 31. Akrura reported to Lord Balaram and Lord Krishna how Dhritarashtra was behaving towards the Pandavas. Thus, O descendant of the Kurus, he fulfilled the purpose for which he had been sent. Thus ends the purport of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 49th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Akrura's Mission in Hastinapur. Is Guru Maharaj? Yes, sir. Chapter 50. Krishna establishes the city of Dwarka. Description. This chapter relates how Lord Krishna defeated Jarasandha 17 times in battle. Yes, Chapter 8. Prayers by Queen Kunti and Parikshit Sev. Text 1. Sutta Goswami said, thereafter the Pandavas, desiring to deliver water to the dead relatives who had desired it, went to the Ganges with Draupadi. The ladies walked in front. Purport. To date, it is the custom in Hindu society to go to the Ganges or any other sacred river to take bath when the death occurs in the family. Each of the family member pours out a potful of the Ganges water for the departed soul and walks in a procession with the ladies in front. The Pandavas also followed the rules more than 5,000 years ago. Lord Krishna, being a cousin of Pandavas, was also amongst the family members. Text 2. Having lamented over them and sufficiently offered Ganges water, they bathed in the Ganges, whose water is sanctified due to being mixed with the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. Text 3. There sat the king of the Kurus, Maharaj Yudhishthira, along with his younger brothers and Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, Kunti and Draupadi, all overwhelmed with grief. Lord Krishna was also there. Purport. The battle of Kurukshetra was fought between family members, and thus all affectionate persons were also family members like Maharaj Yudhishthira and brothers Kunti, Draupadi, Subhadra, Dhritarashtra, Gandhari and her daughter-in-law, etc. All the principal dead bodies were in some way or other related with each other, and therefore the family grief was combined. Lord Krishna was also one of them, as a cousin of the Pandavas and nephew of Kunti, as well as brother of Subhadra, etc. The Lord, therefore, was equally sympathetic towards all of them, and therefore he began to pacify them befittingly. Text 4. Citing the stringent laws of the Almighty and their reactions upon living beings, Lord Krishna and the Munis began to pacify those who were shocked and affected. The stringent laws of nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be altered by any living entity. The living entities are eternally under the subjugation of the Almighty Lord. The Lord makes all the laws and orders, and these laws and orders are generally called dharma, a religion. No one can create any religious formula. Bona fide religion is to abide by the orders of the Lord. The Lord's orders are clearly declared in the Bhagavad Gita. Everyone should follow him only, all his orders, and that will make all happy, both materially and spiritually. As long as we are in the material world, our duty is to follow the orders of the Lord. And if, by the grace of the Lord, we are liberated from the clutches of the material world, then in our liberated stage also, we can render transcendental loving service unto the Lord. In our material stage, we can see neither ourselves nor the Lord for want of spiritual vision. But when we are liberated from material affection and are situated in our original spiritual form, we can see both ourselves and the Lord face to face. Mukti means to be reinstated in one's original spiritual status after giving up the material conception of life. Therefore, human life is specifically meant for qualifying ourselves for the spiritual liberty. Unfortunately, under the influence of illusory material energy, we accept this spot life of only a few years as our permanent existence and thus become illusioned by possessing so-called country, home, land, children, family, community, wealth, etc., which are false representations created by Maya, illusion. And under the dictation of Maya, we fight with one another to protect these false possessions. By cultivating spiritual knowledge, we can realize that we have nothing to do with all this material paraphernalia. Then at once we become free from material attachment. This clearance of the misgivings of material existence at once takes place by association with the Lord's devotees, who are able to inject the transcendental sound into the depths of the bewildered heart, and thus make one practically liberated from all lamentation and illusion. Yes, Take 5. The clever Duryodhana and his party cunningly usurped the kingdom of Yudhishthira, who had no enemy. By the grace of the Lord, the recovery was executed, and the unscrupulous kings who joined with Duryodhana were killed by him. Others also died, their duration of life having decreased for their rough handling of the hair of Queen Draupadi. Should I read directly from Kunti's Stuti, Maharaj? Text 18. Srimati Kunti said, O Krishna, I offer my obeisances unto you because you are the original personality and are unaffected by the qualities of the material world. You are existing both within and without everything, yet you are invisible to all. Purport. Srimati Kunti Devi was quite aware that Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, although he was playing the part of a nephew. Such an enlightened lady could not commit a mistake by offering obeisances unto her nephew. Therefore, she addressed him as the original Purusha, beyond the material cosmos. Although all living entities are also transcendental, they are neither original nor infallible. The living entities are apt to fall down under the clutches of material nature, but the Lord is never like that. In the Vedas, therefore, he is described as a chief among all living entities. Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. Then again, he is addressed as Ishvara, or the controller. The living entities, or the demigods like Chandra and Surya, are also to some extent Ishvara. But none of them is the supreme Ishvara, or the ultimate controller. He is the Parameshvara, or the super soul. He is both within and without. Although he was present before Srimati Kunti as a nephew, he was also within her and everyone else. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, I am situated in everyone's heart, and only due to me one remembers, forgets, and is cognizant, etc.
Next sloka.
Text 19. Being beyond the range of limited sense perception, you are the eternally irreproachable factor covered by the curtain of deluding energy. You are invisible to the foolish observer, exactly as an actor dressed as a player is not recognized. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Sri Krishna affirms that less intelligent persons mistake him to be an ordinary man like us, and thus they deride him. The same is confirmed here in Vaikuntha. The less intelligent persons are those who rebel against the authority of the Lord. Such persons are known as asuras. The asuras cannot recognize the Lord's authority. When the Lord himself appears amongst us as Ram, Nrsimha, Varaha, or his original form as Krishna, he performs many wonderful acts which are humanly impossible. As we shall find in the 10th canto of his great literature, Lord Sri Krishna exhibited his humanly impossible activities even from the days of his lying on the lap of his mother. He killed the Putna witch, although she smeared her breast with poison just to kill the Lord. The Lord sucked her breast like a natural baby, and he sucked out her very life also. Similarly, he lifted the Govardhan hill just as a boy picks up a frog's umbrella and stood several days continuously just to give protection to the residents of Vrindavan. These are some of the superhuman activities of the Lord described in the authoritative Vedic literatures like the Puranas, Itihasas, histories, and Upanishads. He has delivered wonderful instructions in the shape of Bhagavad Gita. He has shown marvelous capacities as hero, as a householder, as a teacher, and as a renouncer. He is accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead by such authoritative personalities as Vyas, Devala, Asita, Narada, Madhava, Shankara, Ramanuja, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jiva Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and all other authorities of the line. He himself has declared as much in many places of the authentic literatures. And yet, there is a class of men with demoniac mentality who are always reluctant to accept the Lord as the supreme absolute truth. This is partly due to their poor fund of knowledge and partially due to their stubborn obstinacy, which results from various misdeeds in the past and the present. Such persons should not recognize Lord Sri Krishna even when he was present before him. Another difficulty is that those...
Next local.
Text 20. You yourself descend to propagate the transcendental science of devotional service unto the hearts of the advanced transcendentalists and mental speculators, who are purified by being able to discriminate between matter and spirit. How then can we women know you perfectly? Purport. Even the greatest philosophical speculators cannot have access to the region of the Lord. It is said in the Upanishads that the Supreme Truth, the absolute personality of Godhead, is beyond the range of the thinking power of the greatest philosopher. He is unknowable by great learning or by greatest brain. He is knowable only by one who has his mercy. Others may go on thinking for him for years together, yet he is unknowable. This very fact is corroborated by the queen, who is playing the part of an innocent woman. Women in general are unable to speculate like philosophers, but they are blessed by the Lord because they believe at once in the superiority and almightiness of the Lord. And thus they offer obeisances without reservation. The Lord is so kind that he does not show special favor only to one who is a great philosopher.